You have two personas.
I tend to have a lot of these family values or Christian values. I don't believe that we should have zero immigrants forever, or even zero immigrants from non-white countries.
That your father was inherently racist.
And it's very low, and I think you know exactly what you're doing, and people can see what you're doing. I'll defend my views, and I think that, so let's leave him out of it. Let's just not talk about my father, because my father isn't here. The older generations of black people were very respectful, very humble, very decent. I think everybody, if we're being honest, is racist.
I'm sure you've already seen the Piers Morgan interview with Nick Fuentes. If not, well, I guess I'll be the first to introduce you to this interview. In this interview, Piers challenges Nick directly on his beliefs. Is it fair the way he did it? We'll get into that. So a few weeks ago, probably a month or so ago, Tucker Carlson interviewed Nick Fuentes and got a lot of backlash for not pressing him appropriately in the viewers of YouTube's opinion. So Piers is going into this interview being a little more assertive, maybe a lot more assertive, and he is attempting to challenge Nick on some of the things that he has said in the past. So at the beginning of Piers's interview, he had some clips from other people giving their opinions about Nick, both good and bad.
If I were writing a glossary entry on the Streisand effect, I wouldn't put a picture of her next to it. I would put a picture of Nick Fuentes.
They have opted to not do so when it comes to Nazis like Nick Fuentes.
Fuentes takes this guy apart brick by brick. It's a full takedown.
My concern is that people who are a bit more moderate are deeply alarmed by Nick Fuentes.
I was very happy to see that, Nick Fuentes really passed that test with flying colors.
That fragmentation is being caused purposefully by a splinter faction of people led by a young man named Nick Fuentes.
That's the war. Can you get the beef prices down? Not crazy things that Nick Fuentes or these other loons say on social media.
Well, it looks like all the screaming about Nick Fuentes on the internet is finally dying down a little bit.
So now we had on this guy, this Fuentes guy, and never challenged him.
The truth is, it doesn't make a lot of sense to spend all this time talking about Nick Fuentes, but not actually to Nick Fuentes. People who say you shouldn't give him a platform overlook the very obvious fact that he already has a platform of his own.
So that's the two opinions from both sides of who Nick Fuentes is. So what is it that Nick Fuentes has said that is so controversial, that people have so much opinion about? Let's take a look.
I don't intend to ambush you. I intend it to be an examination of what you said on the record, an examination of what you believe or what you say you believe, and an examination of what your rising popularity says about the state of the conservative movement in America. So those are my goals from this interview. What are your goals? Why are you doing it?
I thought it'd be interesting. And, you've talked a lot about me on your show over the years, and this is the first time you actually extended the invitation. I think it might be the second, actually. I think we talked about doing it during A24 a few years ago, but you've talked a lot about me with the panel, and now you've extended the invitation to talk to me. And I think it'd be interesting for me to maybe clarify some positions and maybe get to know you a little better as well. So I'm looking forward to it.
There is a belief that you have two personas. There's one that you roll out now for podcasts and for shows like mine, where you come across as reasonable. And then there's your show on Rumble, where you often come across as having, a very unreasonable view on things.
So this is an interesting comment that Piers makes. So most people that are on YouTube, if they want to say things that they really feel, or they want to be a little controversial and funny or whatever, they can't always do it on YouTube. So they go to Rumble and they say things freely. And so that's what Piers is talking about here. And I think that this is one of the few points that I felt that Pierce made that actually makes sense. So the reason I say that is, so there are two different modes people are in for YouTube and for Rumble, even though they're the same person, they have the same outlooks on live, but they're kind of limited in what they can say on the YouTube channel. And that's what Nick kind of addresses here.
This is what Coleman Hughes said about you.
Nick Fuentes knows exactly what he's doing. He is consciously playing this double game as part of a long-term strategy to become popular enough to take the reins of power, at which point he plans to pivot towards the extreme and unpopular policies that he advocates daily on Rumble.
So first of all, what is your response to that?
Well, first of all, I would say that Coleman Hughes is a propagandist. He works for the Free Press, which is run by Barry Weiss. So I think you have to consider the source. And Barry Weiss is a pro-Israel partisan. Free Press is just bought out by CBS for $150 million. He is right about the two personas. And I think that everybody understands this on some level. On my show, I make jokes and I use rhetoric and I'm hyperbolic because for a long time, I had an audience that was small on these like dissident platforms. I was on D Live for many years. A lot of people don't even know what that is. And so I had a small following and we had sort of like an in-group sense of humor and memes and things like that. And you talk about it one way on a freewheeling live stream when I'm by myself and I'm ranting and we make jokes and we play devil's advocate. We play with different positions. But then when you sit down in an interview like this one and people ask me a good faith question, what do you actually believe? Well, then I clarify and I say, well, here I'm not joking. Here I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm not being rhetorical. I'll tell you precisely what I believe. As far as this idea that I'm going to get power and then turn into Hitler, that just sounds totally insane to me.
So that's a pretty good clarification. Like I was saying, people will say different things or act differently on Rumble than they do on YouTube because of the restrictions on there. And from what I hear, what he's saying, and I don't really know Nick Fuentes, I don't follow him, but some of my kids have followed him over the years, and I was like, oh man, that guy's too much. But what I hear him saying is like, you know, I was on D Live. I know some of the people I used to follow were on D Live for a little while as an alternative to YouTube. And what he's saying is I was young and I was a kid and well, he didn't say kid, but when he was younger and first starting out 10 years ago, because he's 27 right now, that he was just ranting to his small little audience, much like the gamers do. The gamers get on there, they talk a bunch of smack, they talk smack to each other. And that's what I hear him saying. And then when he's on a platform like this, he is more direct in clarifying, not using rhetoric, as he said, or trying to be funny. And I think that's a legitimate answer. What I have noticed is from all the people that you've seen, like Jillian Michaels, Bill Maher, and others, they never played this clip where he's explaining, like, yeah, I kind of have two different personas because that's the nature of YouTube and other social platforms. So I don't see a real problem with him in that explanation. So let's move on.
Do you have aspirations for political power?
Not really. I think that if I wanted to run for office, I wouldn't say a lot of the things that I say. I don't know that a lot of people would vote for me. I tend to offend everybody, even a lot of people that like me. So no, I'm a truth teller. I like to tell the truth. I like to do my live stream.
So that's an interesting comment. He doesn't have any aspirations for political office. And I would agree. The things that he does say that I've heard, that we'll get into a few of them here, would probably disqualify him from any kind of serious run for office, politically speaking. So, but why is this guy so popular? So I think we'll uncover some of that later in this video.
Your upbringing. I know you grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. Tell me about your early years.
Or early how? Like my childhood or a little bit later?
Yeah, your childhood, yeah.
Well, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago in LaGrange Park, as you say. My parents are ethnics. My father's half Mexican, half Irish. My mother's Italian. And they both came from a pretty rough upbringing themselves. They both were raised by single mothers, not because of divorce, but because both of their fathers had died. They endured a lot of dysfunction. And I think that's one of the reasons they came together and they related to each other and they wanted to create a normal upbringing for their children. They wanted to have a normal family life. And so they moved out to LaGrange Park away from the city. And they raised me and my sister and really put us first. I think that's a big reason why I tend to have a lot of these family values or Christian values. My mother quit her job and stayed at home to raise us. And so I have a very close relationship with my parents, with my sister. We're a very tight family. And we grew up in a pretty idyllic town. In Chicago, we love our hot dogs. We have our baseball parade and get a hot dog. And so I love where I came from. I love the city. It's a working class city. I love the people here. They're very good, humble, down to earth, decent people. And I guess I had my political, not to jump ahead, but this is a big part of where my political awakening came from. And I read a lot of things online and I realized the country does not look like LaGrange Park. It doesn't look like Western Springs or Hinsdale or Elmhurst. It looks very different. The country's undergoing a radical transformation because of immigration.
So it sounds like a kid grew up in the suburbs of Michigan. It doesn't sound overtly offensive to me. I have memories from when I was a kid, and things are definitely different today than they were when I was younger. And not all for the better. Yeah, there's technology. Yeah, there's certain conveniences we have, but the whole social order of things seems to be in a bit of disarray with this defund the police kind of thing, and just all that craziness that's going on out there. And he brings up the immigration issue. That's a huge issue today. And from the last administration, it would put us at a fever pitch of what do we do? What do we do with all this, these issues? So yeah, my hometown has changed quite a bit and not for the better. So I identify with what he's saying is you want to keep pure or keep as good as possible the upbringing you had, and bring that lifestyle into today's world where things were nice and you had your brother or your sister, your family, your mom stayed at home. He's obviously a traditionalist in that sense. And dad was working for a living. And that was, for the most part, my youth as well. So I can identify with what he's saying and wanting to preserve that. There shouldn't be anything wrong with saying that. But let's carry on and see what else he has to say.
And so I saw that and I said, this is not really a desirable change. I don't like the south side of Chicago or the west side or LA or certain parts of Boston as much as I like where I came from. And I guess that's what made me an American nationalist. I said, I want to preserve my home and the things that are familiar to me and the things I like about my home, what makes it America. So that's a little bit about my background. I don't know where you want to go with that, but
well,
that's kind of where I came from.
My first obvious question is, were your parents immigrants to the United States, or were their parents, or were their grandparents? In other words, at some stage, I presume there were immigrants in your family who came to the US. Is that correct?
There were. I believe my mother was fourth generation and my father was third generation. So their ancestors came here on my mom's side in the 1860s, I believe, the first wave of Italian immigration. My father's ancestors, I think they came around at the turn of the century in 1900.
So Piers asks Nick a little bit about his background, about his family's immigration status and how they got here. Let's see how Nick responds to this and what he has to say about his own family immigrating here.
Are they not affected at all by the fact that if it wasn't for immigration, you wouldn't exist as an American?
Well, I would certainly exist, but like you said, maybe not as an American. Certainly that's influenced in some measure. But I think that the kind of immigration that we had for a long time in the country, it's different than the immigration that we have now. And let's just say for openers, it's different immigrants. They're coming from a different place with a different culture, a different religion. It's not the same as it was. So first, you have a qualitative difference. My ancestors, for the most part, I have 3 European grandparents from Ireland and Italy, 1 from Mexico. They came from Europe. They came from a society where there's a common ancestry, there's a common religion, common civilization. The people that have come in since 65, since Hart-Celler, they're coming from China, India, the Northern Triangle, Mexico, Venezuela. And so first, they're just different people. Secondly, it's a quantitative difference. There's way more, and it's an unceasing, always increasing wave. For the first 3 or 4 waves of immigration, you would have a major influx of immigrants and then it would stop. And then you'd have another wave and then it would stop. This one, it just keeps going up for 35 years and it's too many. So that's really where I would draw the distinction between maybe where I originate from. I would even just simply call that immigration. What this is an invasion. It's a completely different policy.
So that is one of the things that I agree with what Nick is saying, is that it's a different atmosphere for the immigrant. You used to have to come here with a goal in mind. You had to learn the language. You had to have a certain amount of cash in hand, from what I understand. I have a friend that was telling me about his grandparents that came here, and they were French. They weren't allowed just to come here and live off the government. They had to come over here with a savings. I believe it was $5,000 at the time, and they had to have a certain time frame where they got employment, or even have it worked out where they knew they were going into a job. And I guess there were some employers that would be friendly to the immigrants coming in. That is not the case today. And that's the point Nick is saying. When you just open up the gates and you've let 10 to 20 million people in unvetted, he's talking about the ever increasing wave. That's what he's talking about. And that's not disputed. What is disputed is that the one form of immigration is the same as the other. And I would agree. Thousands, tens of thousands coming over that are fully documented and coming over with a plan and coming over with a little bit of savings and coming over to add to the economy in a legal way is way different than waves of millions of people coming over and inundating the entire society that they're coming into, whether it's Los Angeles or whatever. And people want to conflate the two. They want to make them the same, and they're just not the same. And I feel that people are not being intellectually honest if they're saying those are the same thing. And if you bring it up, then you're a xenophobe, and that's just a ridiculous position to take, in my opinion. And I know I got friends and family that disagree, and I've had discussions, and we just disagree on the purpose of it. I think the outcome is obvious. It's not a great plan. Anyway, I agree with Nick at this point. What I want to point out is the conversation is going fairly decent. I think Piers is asking some pointed questions, and Nick is being pretty transparent, I would say. And it's a pretty good mood in the interview right now. But let's see if that changes.
Can't even call it the same thing.
But you mentioned Mexico in that list, and your father is half Mexican. So
yeah,
I mean, by your criteria, part of the invasion would include your father, presumably, and his immediate descendants who came from Mexico.
Okay, see, that's the problem. He's already trying to reframe this to say that the immigration from 30, 40 years ago is the same as it is today. He's saying, oh, well, because you have an opinion about it, then you must hate your dad's origins, or you're being hypocritical and accepting your father, but not accepting the millions and millions and millions that are coming over now. And that's this is one of the first dishonest positions that Piers is holding. He knows there's a difference, and most of the people watching know that there's a difference. but because you want to have a side and you want to be opposing to the other side, you will make concessions in the argument so that you can root for your team. And I just don't think that's intellectually honest.
Not really true, because when my father's ancestors came here, it was a small fraction of the total immigrants that came from Mexico. I don't believe that we should have zero immigrants forever, or even zero immigrants from non-white countries.
So you won't hear this clip. This is a very good point. He's not saying that non-white countries should be sending immigrants here. That's not what he's saying. And notice you'll never see that clip on anybody else's, the mainstream YouTubers. And I just think it's, to be honest, he's saying, I'm not saying that dark people shouldn't be here. And that's a good thing, because that would definitely be problematic.
But you have to draw the distinction. My father's father, he was here in the 40s and 50s. It was his parents, or I believe either his parents or grandparents, that came here even earlier. Up until 1965, 90% of the immigrants were coming from Europe. I have no problem with that. If we have 10% of them coming from Mexico or Latin America, maybe that's reasonable, but that's not what it is now. Now you've got 10 million illegals in 4 years under Joe Biden, and you got millions more legal immigrants from China, India, Venezuela, El Salvador. And it's so many with no break for assimilation, and they're all from non-white countries. It's transforming what America is. And again, that's the distinction. That's what makes it unacceptable.
So that's controversial, right? But does he have a point? There's Somalia also that's coming over, and there's reports in the news about Somalia gangs taking over certain apartment buildings, or it escapes me right now. But a lot of the countries he had mentioned, they don't want to come in and assimilate. For example, there are some areas, I don't know if it was Minnesota, but people coming over from the belief of Islam, where they announce the 5 prayers a day through a PA system of some kind, and they blast it out at ridiculous volumes. That is clearly a noise ordinance violation at least, at minimum. But so what the cities have done in response to that, so they can be nice, is they've waived or changed the ordinance so that Islam can do their prayer announcements, or however they describe them, starting at 5 a.m. Like, I don't like when the rooster down the street is squawking at 5 a.m. or before dawn. Like, that's unreasonable. And that's what he's saying, is they don't want to assimilate to the American way. They want us to assimilate to their way. And is that what immigration was 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago? Is that what it was? That's not what it was. And is it wrong for him to notice that it's been changed? And what is he making a good point, that the number of people immigrating here, especially over the last 4 years under the Biden administration, does that put an undue burden on us to try to accept another country's beliefs and systems of lifestyle? It is going to change. It's difficult. It's difficult. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have immigration, but is it problematic? It's a fair question. It's a hard question. I will agree. It's a hard question, but it's a real question, and it should be a question for concern. So let's carry on.
I always believe everybody is a product of their environment. Right? I've interviewed thousands of people. Maybe 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people from all different walks of life. But the one common theme I would say is everyone's a product of their environment. And I was reading some stuff about you in the last few days. There was an episode of your podcast where you talked about your father, Bill Fuentes, and how he wouldn't take the family, including you, to certain restaurants because he believed they were associated with African Americans. We would be deciding where to go to eat, you said. What are we going to do for dinner tonight? It was a running joke. Me and my sister would say Applebee's, and my dad would say we would never eat at Applebee's. Not in a million years should you be caught dead, Fuentes said about Applebee's. Go to a different restaurant, a local restaurant. No Applebee's, no Red Lobster. That is commonly known as black fare. And you also shared another story about your family and restaurants. Said, before me and my sister were born, my family had a saying about Olive Garden that contains the N-word that we're not allowed to say. So my question, based on that anecdote that you say on your own podcast, is, do you think you grew up in a racist environment, that your father was inherently racist, and that thought process moved to you?
Well, I would say it's a new low. I've been attacked for being a racist many times, but to attack my father, to attack my parents based on anecdotes, I would say that's sort of a new low.
Hang on, it's your anecdote.
Yeah, but he's not here to defend himself.
You are.
And my parents are.
You told the story.
And I will. And I'll
I'm not trying to
them.
ambush you. As I said at the start, Nick, to be clear.
No, it's not an ambush.
Nick, to be clear,
I think
I'm
everybody
not
understands.
ambushing you. I'm literally reading an anecdote that you revealed on your podcast. It's you that's put it in the public domain.
I know.
I'm simply asking you whether my assessment of that, which is that your father didn't want to take you to certain restaurants because of what you refer to as, they were commonly known as black fare, whether that attitude to African Americans in that instance permeated to you.
So I agree with both on this. Nick apparently shared on his podcast about an inside joke that they had about Applebee's, and yeah, that's not a great look. But I don't see the point of Pierce going after his father that way. Although I do agree with Pierce that, well, you brought it up on your own podcast, but I would say that, like if Nick's saying like, look, don't bring my dad into it. You can attack me all day and all night. I respect that too.
It's a reasonable question.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think everybody knows what that is, but I'll address it. I'll engage with it, and I'll defend my father from the charge of racism.
Sure.
No, my parents are not racist, and they've never been racist. I'll tell you about my parents. They used to have a school in Chicago in the South Loop where they instructed people on how to shoot firearms. It was a security school, and most of the clients were black. My grandmother, she grew up in the projects in the city. And so my family, being in Chicago, being ethnics, being Italian, Irish, Mexican in the West Side on Taylor Street, all over the city. My family for many generations have lived near and around black people. And look, my views about black people and their views about black people are shaped with experiences with black people. And what they will tell you, what my parents would say if they were here, is that for many, many years, the older generations of black people were very respectful, very humble, very decent. In fact, my grandma used to have an anecdote. She grew up in a lot of dysfunction. Her mother was mentally ill, and they would be having dinner in the projects, and there'd be so much chaos and dysfunction and disagreement and fighting. And she would look across the way out the window at a black family in the other apartment, and they'd be holding hands around the table saying grace. And this is sort of the culture that used to prevail. But now what you have in the city is that there's no accountability for the black people. And now Chicago has become a complete dump because these teenagers go out and they take over the city. They call them teen takeovers. That's the euphemism for it. They're teenagers, but they all come from the same neighborhood. They drive up there and they mug people and attack people, and they destroy cars and destroy shops. We had the Festival of Lights a couple of weeks ago. It's supposed to be a family event. And they light up the trees, and they, there's a big parade. I was in the parade one year, and you had a bunch of black people there shooting each other. 7 people shot, a 14-year-old killed in the Magnificent Mile. And I know there's a lot of black people that feel the same way about this. They say, we've lost control of the city.
So he's bringing up a thing again with the difference between a couple of decades earlier and the way things are today. And yeah, there is a difference. Like he's speaking about the black families and what his folks felt about them in the older days. and I'll relate that to Hispanics. And this is true, and this is probably not going to be comfortable to say or for you to hear, but when I was growing up, the Mexican families that I knew were hardworking men and women. They were good families for the most part, but in I don't know if it's a generational thing, the way we raised our kids or way our previous generation raised us. They became wanting to be more friends with their kids than a disciplinarian. And what I've seen happen, and it's not just regulated to one race or another, but in my hometown, I've seen a lot of the same things. The town as it stands today is way different than it was when I was a kid. There's a lot more violence going on. There's a lot more crime. I don't even like to stay. I won't even stay overnight to visit family that still live there, just because it can be a little sketchy, and especially if you're out at the wrong time of night. And I don't see a problem in making a distinction between the two time periods and saying that one was more down to earth and wholesome than it is in the other sense, which is today, which is a lot worse. And we've seen laws loosened. I'll get the little buddy here, and seen people want to or judges wanting to let criminals go, or let them go early, or let them on parole, and we see violence, carry on after that. And I think it's a fair thing that he's bringing up. He's making a very distinctive claim about the two time frames, right? So I think that's reasonable.
And we're looking for accountability. We have a lot of black people that are always outraged about racism, outraged about attitudes from white people, but they're never ashamed of some of these behaviors, never ashamed of some of the things that go on. And that's why I think there's a lot of negative attitudes these days. And so, again, I think those attitudes, you say I'm a product of my environment. I am. And so are my parents and my grandparents. Unlike you, because you're not even American, in Chicago, we have to live in a big, diverse city where there's a lot of different kinds of people. And I think anybody in Chicago will tell you the same.
I live in.
So, he brings up another good point about what society says of young. And he lives in Chicago, so he has a perspective. I lived close to San Bernardino, and San Bernardino in Southern California has some very sketchy areas that are lawless. So what he's saying is, shouldn't we as parents, as men and women of our society, be embarrassed of our children that are doing these things and living that way? And can we admit that in a lot of these cases, we have no control of the situation?
I live in London. It's one of the biggest and most diverse cities in the world.
But it's not the same.
So this point Piers is trying to make is saying, I live in a diverse city. Is London and where Piers lives the same as Chicago? I don't know if you know about Chicago. Chicago has a lot of problems. They have, 30 to 50 shootings in a weekend sometimes, especially if they're holiday weekends or long weekends. I remember when the Vegas shooting happened, there were 52 people shot and killed. And in that same time frame, like within a week or two, I can't remember if it was before or after, Chicago had 50 murders over a holiday weekend. But we don't really care about that, do we? We're worried about the mass shooting because it was a white guy that did it. But when it's black on black crime, for some reason, nobody cares. I don't understand that, because if I'm a Hispanic guy and I have a problem in my neighborhood, and I'm losing that many people every weekend, and there's gunshots firing every night, why would I want to stay there? My wife and I went to a movie quite a while ago in San Bernardino. And did we hear vehicles backfiring, or were there gunshots? I don't know. But why do we have to be concerned about that? Like, it's nonsense.
Well, actually, it's a big diverse city. The only difference is we don't have the gun violence because we don't have guns. That's a whole different story. I don't want to get into that with you. I have got into that before in America.
You got a knife problem. You got sword problems.
We have problems with
Aladdin.
We have problems with violent crime. I make no pretense of it. So the idea that somehow I'm cosseted in London because I'm not in Chicago.
I didn't say that.
Well, you kind of implied it, but I guess my point about the environment, I'm not saying you are a product of your environment. I'm saying most people are in some capacity. When I read that anecdote, it's just to remind you, it's not something I have put out there. You told this story, right? And you said that
you said this. We're looping. You said this already.
But you haven't really directly, I think, responded to it, which is whether your father would not take you to certain restaurant chains because he associated them with black Americans. Is that true?
No, well, see here, if you're in America, you would say that Olive Garden is not real Italian food. Applebee's, TGI Fridays, this stuff is a load of crap. My dad was just a food snob, but no, it's got nothing to do with that. My best friend in first grade was a black guy. We're not a racist family. So
okay, so when you told the story, I'm just curious. So when you told that anecdote,
so here he says we're not a racist family. Pierce is going to press him on that a little later.
Which clearly, on the face of it, is racist, right? You're basically saying your father made racist decisions about where you would go as a family to eat. Are you saying? No. Well, I'm just going to ask you a question. Are you saying that when you told that story, you didn't mean to infer that he was racist? And do you understand why, when somebody like me reads that anecdote for the first time, as I did this week, I reach a different conclusion?
Well, I understand what you're doing, which is a sort of making of a murderer. How did he become racist? Well, his father didn't eat at Olive Garden because he said that's not real Italian food. Hang on, can I? What's with the interruptions? Can I explain?
I'm literally reminding you of something you said on your show, which led me to conclude a certain thing. If I'm wrong, tell me.
Yeah, it was said in jest as a humorous anecdote, and now you're trying to spin it into a narrative, which is his parents are racist. He comes from a long line of racists. And I think everybody knows my parents are boomers. Mm-hmm. And these people well, you're a boomer, I guess, too, in a way, 60. Right? You were born in
60.
19? Yeah. So you're a boomer also. Or maybe you're a Gen Xer. I suppose it's sort of on the cusp. But it's a humorous anecdote. These are kind of the attitudes of baby boomers in society. But you're trying to spin it into a narrative, which is you're a product of your environment. Your dad's racist because of this joke. Now you're a racist. And I don't think that's a fair characterization.
Okay. People can make their own minds up. They can go back and listen to you say it. I mean, the beauty of what I'm going to talk to you about in this interview is that almost all of it is just going to be reminding you what you have said and asking you what you meant. Your position about that story is that it was a joke, okay?
I think he probably could have clarified a little more. Like, I've brought up San Bernardino. San Bernardino is primarily... at least the crime that goes on there is primarily black and brown crime, and it shouldn't be. In this country, we get real sensitive about saying that because we have our identity in our race, and that's unfortunate because that forces us to put a blind eye toward what our own people are doing. You know, like when we're doing the riots in Los Angeles after a Laker game or after a Dodger, you know, not a game, but win a championship or something. And, you know, I see a bunch of Hispanic people out there just drunk and beating people up and throwing stuff and starting fires and stuff. That's embarrassing. And it shouldn't be, oh man, I can say something because I'm brown. Okay. Or olive. I'm a little lighter than most. But I'm not Canelo light, but I'm lighter than most Mexicans. And why is it okay for me to say like, man, that's embarrassing? But if a black guy says like, man, you guys need to get your people under control. No, I'm offended he's being racist. Or if a white guy says it to either one of the black guy or the brown guy, says, man, you need to get that situation under control. That's now a racist comment. And I just don't buy into that. We try to claim that we're a colorblind society, but what it means is that you don't want to criticize anybody that's darker than you. And that's where all the white guilt comes from. And that's where people who are, afraid to say what is, we do see color, and we are bound by it to where we can't say things honestly, and we can't notice what's happening. And if you want to make a discussion about like, well, why is the inner city the way it is? That's a whole different discussion, because there's a lot of responsible parties, if you're looking politically, on both sides. What's happening? Who's taking care of the city? And when you relax the laws and you don't prosecute the people that are doing the offenses, what is the inevitable outcome of that? You let people out early. You don't even send them to jail. You put them on house arrest, or you give them probation, and they continue to do the same things over and over and over. What is the outcome of that? Is it going to be good, or is it going to be bad? And is it going to perpetuate? Is it going to keep going? That's a real problem. And if we're too afraid to say that this town is doing this, or this city is doing that, and they're not doing things right, what other recourse do we have? I mean, honestly, I think it's an honest question. So I don't see a problem in pointing that out. And it shouldn't be a problem in it. What is good, and what is bad is bad. It doesn't matter about what color the person is.
I want to come to something else you said. This is where you talk about Jews, women, and blacks. Let's just take a listen.
They're always coming up with, no, it's not the Jews. No, it's not women. No, it's not blacks. It's actually really complicated. No, it fucking isn't at all. Jews are running society. Women need to shut the fuck up. Blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part. And we would live in paradise. It's that simple.
Okay. Would you like to clarify what you meant there?
That's all true. That's 100% true. Everything I said in that clip is true.
Including that blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part.
Yeah. Yes.
But all of them.
So this is one of the clips that you will see over and over and over again, and it's delivered terribly. I mean, what excuse can you make? And he's talking about. Let me try to address each one. So the Jews control everything. Well, there are certain factions of the Jewish community that are in entertainment. They control, big money, from what I understand. I mean, I'm not into that. I don't really know. I've only heard things, and I don't know. I don't know that should be a point of contention. Maybe he's more in tune with what people are doing. I'd like to hear the context of what he said, why he said it that way. Like, I would have to watch the show, and that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm trying to listen to the whole interview and get a not just a bird's eye view, but an intimate view of what he feels. I feel like I have to go back and do some research and watch some of his other stuff. I know that he made the comment about women need to shut the F up. I know what he said in the past. I've seen some of those, and he's saying today's women are mouthy. They're offensive. They're on OnlyFans. I mean, come on. I mean, it again. The quality of the young woman today in college, coming out of high school, is vastly different than when and I'm a Gen Xer, than when I was coming out of high school in the mid 80s. It is a different world. Like, we acknowledge that it's a different world, and that women have attitude problems, and young people in general just have attitude problems. I feel like I sound like my dad, like, oh man, this generation is just going to hell. And yeah, there seems to be a continual degrade of quality people. Society is having a hard time. Maybe we had too many people. I don't know. Anyway, I feel like I'm my old man say the thing about the younger generation don't know nothing. And they're disrespectful. That's more of a generational thing from one generation to the next, right? So the thing about the blacks, man, the way he said that is just that's hard to hear. And I don't think you can, the way it sounds on the clip. Now I know he will go in this interview, he will and has earlier in the interview described what has happened in the change in society, the perception, what we're allowed to notice and what we're not allowed to notice. So, but I don't like the way he says that, and you're just going to offend everybody saying it that way. I just think that he is a provocateur, and I feel like it's part of his shtick, it's part of his brand, if you will. And like he said earlier in the interview, he grew up in this environment of social media and platforms like DLive and YouTube, and where he early on could say what he wanted to say. So, but I don't know that you can make really any excuses for the way that comes off. It sounds terrible.
No, for the most part.
What does the most part mean? What percentage of American blacks would you like to see in prison?
Whatever the percentages of the murderers. I think it's 1 in 20 black men will commit a murder in their lifetime. So maybe let's say that 5%.
Oh, so
okay. So, I mean, he's made a distinction between all black people and murderers. Okay. Now he should have said that, right? Like if you're having a discussion with somebody, you just don't say that like if you're just talking about a family in a household, the whole family needs to do this, and they need to all go to jail. If just the son or just the daughter has done something, if one member of the family has done something, then it doesn't make everybody else in the whole family guilty. And that's in his statement. Or the clip they played, that's the way it came off. At least that's the way I interpreted it, and it does sound racist the way he said it. But if he's making a distinction that he's saying the criminal element needs to be prosecuted and sentenced for whatever it is they're doing and not let off the hook, all right, I can understand that.
So you're talking about black people who murder people?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But you didn't say that.
That's
You just said
problem.
blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part. You didn't clarify that you were talking about black murderers.
Right. No, you're right. That's a good addition to that. That's a great point.
Do you think it's funny? Or
I do. I think it's hilarious. I think it's totally true.
do you think a black American would find it funny? You think that blacks should be imprisoned for the most part?
Blacks are my biggest fans. I get high fives all the time. They say, Nick Fuentes, I love your show. They agree with me. And you want to know why? Here's the difference. Black people are the most victimized by other black people. You think black people want to live in the hood and the ghetto and get shot all the time? That's what happens in the south side of Chicago. You should come here. I'll take you there. We could go to Garfield Park.
My son went to Chicago
Inglewood.
University for a year, actually, several years ago.
Okay, so Nick does a real good job of explaining what he's talking about. He's talking about, he says that that black people agree with him, and that he has black fans, and I believe him. I've watched the Hodge twins. I don't know if you're familiar with them. You should look them up. They do an interview with Nick, and it's they acknowledge that the different inner cities have major issues, and they don't shy away from it. And it's refreshing to see somebody admit, that's a problem in the inner city. So what Nick is saying is like, oh, if you don't think it's bad, I'll take you down to the south side or east, whatever side he said, And then Piers says, "Oh, I went to the Chicago University some years back." The Chicago University? You're talking about a campus compared to the inner city? Is that the same? I don't know. It just seems like a stupid thing to say. To try to say, "Oh, I've been in Chicago." Come on.
Yeah, that's a bubble. That's a bubble. You think you're in Chicago and Hyde Park? You don't know Chicago. Go a little bit west, see what it's like over there. And I'll tell you, black people agree with me because they're tired of it too. And maybe not most of them, but a lot of them agree with what I say about that because they know how it is. That's why the first thing they do when they make a little bit of money is they go and leave to another neighborhood.
Okay, so what was...
That's a fair point. The woman who fraudulently started the BLM movement and took all the proceeds and bought herself 4 mansions in 2022, I think it was, spending over, I think it was something like $18 million. I don't know, maybe it was 19, something huge. Bought herself 4 big homes, all in the white community. I think the distinction of saying that she bought it in the white community is a little bit of a misnomer. I think what it really is she went to an affluent area. She went to the money area where the criminal element doesn't exist on a big scale. And that is what people do. Where does LeBron James live? Does he live in the hood? No, nobody lives in the hood if they don't have to. It's the people that have to live there, the mothers and fathers that are raising kids and grandkids and everything, that are trying to be good, hardworking people. And legislatures pass laws to say that they've relaxed the amount of goods you could steal up to $1,000 in California, and they don't prosecute people, and they let them off the hook, and they're back on the street in a matter of hours or days, that have to live with the decisions that we make on the outside, right? So because they don't have the money to get up and move to Beverly Hills, up into the high affluent areas. So I think it's more of a wage problem, more of a class issue than it is white and black. So let's carry on.
Let's remind me again, the percentage of black men who commit murder in America. What was the percentage you gave me?
It's 1 in 20. 1 in 20.
It's 1 in 100.
No, it's 1 in 20.
No. Less than 1 in 100 black US men commit murder. That's the most up-to-date crime statistics in America.
That's not true. I've seen other statistics. They say 1 in 20 will eventually commit a murder.
So your rate means that you're saying that 5 times as many black men commit murder as the official crime statistics say.
Yeah, there's a report, I believe, on X by Data Hazard. I'll have to go and double check that for you. But yes, there's some pretty shocking evidence that says that it's far more alarming than you would think.
So that's, I don't know, it seems like a lot to me. Let's carry on.
Okay, but you would accept that the official crime statistics are 1 in 100, or you wouldn't accept that statistic?
I don't know. I don't have it in front of me, but I've seen other evidence. Like I said, Data Hazard on X, I believe, produced a report about a year ago. It said 1 in 20. But I mean, whether it's 1 in 20 or 1 in 100, that's a lot of people, Piers. I mean, this is a lot of white
people commit murder too.
So the difference between 1 in 20 and 1 in 100, that still is a lot. So it seems to me what Piers is saying is that 1 in 100, he doesn't make a distinction. I think he's meaning 1 in 100 annually. And what Nick said is that it's 1 in 20 in the lifetime of a person. So you're talking a single year compared to a lifetime as an adult. I don't know what, 60, 70 years old. I don't know. I don't know how that equates. And I don't know. There's some disconnect in the two numbers. One is a lifetime and one is a single year, I think. And I think the other might be, maybe he's talking about in Chicago. I don't know. That doesn't, something's not lining up. So I'm not really sure where to go with that one. So we'll move on.
Well, they do, don't they?
Okay, but it's about proportionality. I mean, white people are 65% of the population. Blacks are 13%.
Mm-hmm.
And I think anybody would tell you that more black people proportionally commit violent crime than white people. And people vote with their feet. People would rather pay a much higher property tax.
Most mass
what's
shootings.
with the interruptions?
I'm sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, you look at in Chicago, in New York, these neighborhoods are so stratified. People would rather pay a high tax rate. They'd rather pay a much higher property value to live in a less diverse, less black neighborhood because they don't want to live around the violence. And I think that when you look at even on the public transit, the subway, the blue line, you know, people don't want to go there because they know who occupies and menaces the public transit. It is these people like Daniel Penny had to deal with. It's people like Irina Zarutska had to deal with. And that's just the uncomfortable reality.
So I work up in San Francisco. So the other week, I saw that Frankenstein was playing at one of the theaters, and I wanted to see it on the big screen. So I took the BART system. I took the train into San Francisco from where I am, and the subway was fine. It's got like you can do the what's called the clipper on your phone, and you can just tap your phone and get in just like you were paying for the groceries at the grocery store, and it opens the little gates. You go in, the gates shut. So it's pretty secure in there. However, when you get out, immediately can smell weed all over the street, right? There were people that were, and this is like 3:30 in the afternoon. There were people walking back and forth. There's big buildings, business area, and there's people on the street like wasted, passed out, homeless all over the place. And I didn't do a head count of what race they were. They were fairly mixed. I was at a bus stop, and a dude was just sparking up some substance in a pipe. And I'm like, okay, man, I'm gonna walk away from here. So it does sound like Nick is talking about specifically inner city. So I don't know if his previous number on the murder thing is related to that, but the inner cities in a lot of areas, San Francisco being one of them, is horrible. It's unnerving and a little frightening. Like 3:30 in the afternoon, dude's like, man, I'm not high enough right now. And he says sparks up right at the bus stop on the street, daylight, broad daylight. Yeah. So I didn't wait for the next bus. I just walked to the theater from there. So, okay. What do you say about it? What can you say about it other than it is a problem? It's okay to say it's a problem. I promise you, it's okay. Just admit it. A lot of the inner cities are problems.
I said you don't want to live near black people. Let's take a listen to this clip.
I'm a new generation of white person. I'm not living around blacks. Sorry. You know, I want white kids, and I don't want my white kids bringing home black people to marry. It's racial for me. And call me racist. Oh, very Christian of you. I don't give a fuck.
I mean, it couldn't be clearer, really, unless you want to say that's another of your jokes. But you're basically saying, yeah, I'm a racist, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
You're fine with saying you're a racist?
Totally. I think everybody's racist. I think everybody, if we're being honest, is racist. I think everybody, the only people that aren't racist or pretend not to be are white people to their detriment.
Okay. Yeah, I don't like that. I don't, if he's just accepting that because Pierce is throwing it out there like, oh, and he's heard it, 100 times before, and he's just accepting it. No, don't accept that. If you're just accepting that label because you're just sick of defending it, defend it, in my opinion. But what he did say is that I feel that everybody is racist. And so what he's saying is everybody notices, if you see a kid on the street or a young adult, and he's got a male, and he's got, like, for example, in the town I used to live in, Hemet, California, you going down the street and you see a guy with no shirt on. He's on a BMX bike. He looks like he's 30 years old. He looks a little bit ragged and strung out on something. And he happens to be a certain color. Are you racist for noticing? Are you racist because he's a certain color? Does it matter what color he is? Does it matter? He shouldn't be curbing that. I don't want to live by black people. I mean, does that make sense? He's sending the wrong message, or maybe, I don't know, maybe he's sending the right message. Maybe that's what he's saying. And he's saying it's racial for him to want to have just white kids. Well, I mean, in all honesty, there's black people that feel the same way. There's Hispanic people that feel the same way. There's Indian people that feel the same way. Jewish people that feel the same way. And there's factions in each one of those categories that don't feel the same way. I could care less. I don't care. I don't care what race my kids bring home. And it's probably because I'm a mixed bag anyway. I got a little bit of this and a little bit of that, you know. So maybe that's a reason why I don't care as much on that. I'm a mutt myself. So what are you going to do? I just don't think that's a big issue. If he wants to have all white kids, who cares? I don't care if he wants all white kids. It's his prerogative. It's his life, right?
Everybody else is racist.
But earlier in the interview, you really got aggrieved at the idea that your father was a racist.
Okay, so I think there's two different things going on here. I think Nick is saying, I think everybody's racist, right? Because are we going to pretend there's no contention? We know there's contention between white people and pretty much everybody else except maybe Asians. But between when I was growing up, and I see it still today, there's still contention between black people and Mexican people, right? When my kids were in junior high and high school, they had campus shutdowns because there were blacks and whites, blacks and Hispanics, Mexicans fighting. There's going to be a fight after school. There's going to be a this or that after school. There's going to be whatever, like older kids driving up that have already graduated or they're just older. Maybe they were ditching school or whatever, driving up in cars and wreaking havoc. And there would be campus shutdowns, and there would probably be 3 or 4 a year while my kids were in school. There's contention. We have a tendency as people to be tribal. We just do. We have that tendency between Christians and non-Christians and Christians and Jews and non-Jews. It's just a nature that we have. And it's not, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not trying to defend it. I'm just saying what I think is. And it's when we get to know people that goes away and changes. And I think for the most part that should. I'm an introverted guy, so it's difficult for me. But I don't see a problem in being friends with everybody. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
You wanted to make emphatically
because
sure
my father's...
He's not.
Because my father doesn't share my same views on that.
So he's the exception to everyone's a racist.
Well, everybody's a little bit racist. You're right. So maybe everybody, the difference is you're attacking my father. You know, he can get fired from his job.
I'm not attacking your father.
You are.
No, I'm not. I don't know your father. And to be clear, I have no knowledge about him at all. Well,
then let's leave him out of it. Let's leave him out of it if you don't know him.
Hang on, Nick.
Hey, this is like the third or fourth time that Nick has asked him to keep his dad out of it.
On your show. I'm simply reminding you of what you told everybody, millions of people, about your father. If you now want to retract it, fine. If you want to say it was a joke, which is what your position was earlier, fine. But
I don't think Nick is obligated to retract or say anything. He just says, don't talk about my father. He's asked him like 4 times now, like, let's keep my dad out of it. And Piers, in an unwavering attempt, is attacking his father. He's attacking his father with the intent of trying to upset Nick. And to Nick's credit, he's being pretty level-headed about it. He's been through this grill before, I guess. I've only seen the Tucker interview, but I guess other people have interviewed him too. So he's probably accustomed to this kind of attack. And at this point, it's becoming with the father thing. Everything else is a fair game. You said it. You said that you've said that you're a racist, or you've accepted the label that Piers is putting on you. You've accepted it. Like you said some things, and some of them are tough to hear and tough to explain, like what your position on why you would say that. Anyway,
but I'm allowed to put to you things you've said publicly. That's not unfair. That's not me targeting your father. You put that story about him out
You know
there.
what you're doing. You know what you're doing.
I'm asking you about a pretty shocking anecdote, which to me looked like you were saying your father made decisions about where you as a family would eat based on skin color of people who worked at these places. If you say, or use them, if you say that is not what you meant, that's fine. You can respond any way you like. But the idea I can't ask you about it without you saying I'm attacking your father is ridiculous.
No, it's not ridiculous.
Well, you are, and you know what you're doing. And there's a political culture in America where if you have the wrong views, you get fired from your job. And my father has a job. And if you go on here and say you charge him with racism or something, and I'm put in a position where I don't look like I'm sticking to my guns if I don't say my father's a racist, you're putting him in jeopardy. And he's not here to defend himself or explain his views. And it's very low. And I think you know exactly what you're doing, and people can see what you're doing. I'll defend my views. And I think that, so let's leave him out of it. Let's just not talk about my father, because my father isn't here. I'm here.
Okay, well,
I'll
then do you
defend
accept
my
that you
views,
shouldn't
and I'll
talk?
defend
Okay,
the anecdote.
listen, that's fine. But then do you accept you shouldn't talk about your father on your show? And you shouldn't tell...
Absolutely not. Absolutely
so
not.
So it's fine for you to put a story out there which would make most people who listen to that story or watched it at the time on your show conclude that he was racist. It's fine for you to do that. But if I then ask you about it, I'm the one who's being unfair and I've crossed a line. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you're being malicious.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Listen, people are watching this live. They can draw their own conclusions about whether what I just did.
And they will.
Yeah, and I'm sure afterwards, by the way, you'll say, he ambushed me.
I'm curious I'm curious to see if there are other podcasters that are going to be really critical of Nick. Obviously, there's many of those that'll be out there. But are there going to be clips of this, like talking about how Piers just relentlessly goes after Nick's father in order to try to get you, to get Nick upset? Here's what he's trying to do. He's trying to upset Nick, and it's not working. And it's just at this point he's embarrassing himself. I think Piers is looking ridiculous, and whether he's on the cusp of a Xer or a boomer, he's sounding more like an old boomer than anything else.
With your own words.
Whoa.
With your own words.
That's a little presumptuous. I'm not going to say it's an ambush, but I think that's a low blow. And I think you know what you're doing, and that's fine. You're a tabloid journalist. I expected that. I don't think it's an ambush because I knew it would be like this. And people will see what you're doing, and I think they'll say it's low. But as far as you want to talk about racism,
I do.
Let's talk about racism. Let's leave my dad out of it.
Look, you've admitted you're a racist, correct?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Own it.
Okay, that's fine. You're perfectly entitled in a free democratic society to stare down the barrel of his camera and tell me you're a racist. People can judge you accordingly. Many people who have assumed that you're a racist will now have heard it from your own lips. That's fine.
There you go.
That's the point. The point of this interview is to go over the things you've said, which have led people to reach conclusions about you, and to ascertain whether those conclusions are fair and reasonable or not. That's it. I want to play you another clip. This is what you talk about why white people are justified in being racist. Let's take a listen to this.
First, white people are every single bit justified in being racist. Every single bit justified, to the extent that that means going out of your way to avoid black people when you see them.
Okay, so this kind of relates to what I was telling you about going to San Francisco and seeing the movie up there in the no-go zone. Should have been good no-go zone. like I said, I didn't count how many were minorities, and I'm not even going to define that for this video. But what I will say is I saw the crack guy. I saw another lady as I was coming out of the movie, and this was like at 7:30 at night. No, was it that late? 7-ish. And I came out, and there was a woman on the street corner, like just dancing, doing her thing. And excuse me, dude, doing a podcast here, buddy. Just in her own world. And I'm just like, I just got to get across the street. So what he's saying is racist to the extent that you go the other way. I don't like that I just don't like that he puts the racist thing on it. And I know most of you would agree with that, and probably more it's more egregious to you than it is to me. Yeah, I just think it's a hard sell when you're saying it's okay to be racist.
You stand by
Absolutely.
that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So white people should go out of their way to avoid black people when they see them.
Absolutely. They would be wise.
Why?
Because it's a lose-lose proposition. If you're Irina Zarutska and you don't walk the other way, you get stabbed to death and you die. If you're somebody else and you walk on the subway and you stand near a black person or something, maybe it's fine. It's a lose-lose proposition. So no, I think that white people have been beaten into submission, that we're afraid to tell the truth about it. And the truth is that when you go into these major cities like New York or Chicago, I believe she was in North Carolina, there is a menace, which is young, black, adolescent men. They're extremely violent. And we have been told that we have to pretend like they are every other person. We have to be colorblind to that. And we're supposed to go and be in the midst of all this danger. And I think that at this point, it's gotten out of control. You look at the BLM movement, they said that the reason that black people, are violent, or the reason there's crime, is because of police brutality, or redlining, or all these other things. They said we need to get rid of the police. We need to defund them. And a lot of cities did. A lot of cities like Chicago, for example, the police changed the rules of engagement. They don't chase them. It's not a felony if you steal a certain amount of merchandise. They won't chase them on foot. And now the city's totally up for grabs. And now, whether you're in the Gold Coast, or whether you're on the Mag Mile, or you're in the worst neighborhoods in the city, you might get shot, you might get mugged, someone might run up on you. And I tell my followers, it is better to be perceived as racist or racist and walk the other way and maybe keep your life than to say, I'm a good anti-racist. I don't mind that this person's making me uncomfortable. Maybe he's looking a little froggy. I'm going to sit down because I'm a good person, and get stabbed, mugged, whatever. And by the way, this is a strategy. They call it the friendly stranger. There's a crew of them. They do this in Chicago. They stand outside bars, black people. They approach strangers. It's a robbery crew, and they pretend to be a friendly stranger, and then they mug them. And stupid white people say, oh, hi, yeah, nice to meet you. They grin, they laugh, they put up with the nonsense, and then they get mugged.
Look at the
or
disgust
worse.
on Pierce's face.
Sometimes they get executed. And
Out
so
of
as a white
interest,
person,
how do you feel about mass shootings at school?
So this is a very well explained scenario that Nick just said. It's very much what I was talking about with the movie theater, right? You go into the movie theater, you and I heard him make a comment too. We'll use this scenario. You're going to a ball game, right? You're going to go see the Dodgers play or the Lakers play, and you come out and you take the bus to your car, or you get disoriented, you forget where you parked your car because you couldn't park in the parking lot or whatever. You go down the wrong street. You go too many blocks the wrong way, and now you're in the hood. That's frightening. Has it happened to you? You know what I'm talking about, right? Same thing with San Bernardino. For those that live near there, you go the wrong way, half a mile one way or half a mile the other way, and you're in a good area, and suddenly you're on the wrong side of the tracks. Redlands is the same way. You're on the north side, you're probably okay. You're on the south side, you're probably going to run into some trouble. And that's not unreasonable what he's saying. And to the extent that you're going to appear or be perceived as racist because you want to avoid those situations, that shouldn't be a problem. You're avoiding the danger. Maybe it's not the same if you're in Riverside, right? I mean, Riverside has some bad areas too. But if you're in a good neighborhood, a good community, and things are good where you are, you don't have to worry about those things, and you probably don't know the majority of those stories. For some people, it's everyday life, and for the people that don't know and they turn into that everyday life of Hoodlumville, you're out of your element. That young lady, on the subway, she was out of her element. She had no awareness of what was going on. And in 30 seconds, she was gone. Maybe a minute. And what did the guy say? Do you remember what the guy said? He got that white bee. That's just tragic. So what he's saying is it unreasonable what he's saying? I don't like the way he says a lot of what he's saying, but if he's saying, if you're going to think that I am that word, I don't care. I'm going to walk the other way, and you could think I'm that way when I'm at home and I'm safe, rather than thinking that I was a good person, which you won't think that anyway. And then they get gunned down, or they get mugged at the bar, or they get whatever the scenario is. So I think it's if you're being honest, that's an honest observation. And if we were really colorblind, we wouldn't care that. And he shouldn't care either. He shouldn't be framed. I don't think he should. He does a disservice to his explanation when he says previously, like, okay, I'm racist, own it. And it comes off to me. A lot of this interview comes off to me like a dad talking to his son who doesn't respect him. The cat, you are just being a pest. Hey, you see I'm doing something right now? So anyway, that's my take on that. So, all right, let's move on.
I think they're bad.
Who do you think commits the vast majority of the mass shootings?
I'm sure it's white people.
Right. So how do you feel about that?
I think that white people do more antisocial violence. I think black people participate in more gang violence. I think that's the difference.
What's the difference to the victims?
Well, okay, I don't know what that matters. Okay, if we're going to say why does that matter to the victims? Why does that matter to the victims? Why does it matter to the victims of vehicle accidents? You're talking about 40,000 lives. Do those lives matter, Piers? That's a stupid argument. Like if you're going to say that school shootings are the most egregious thing going on, then what about the 40,000 lives that are lost in vehicle accidents every year? Every year. Like that's a stupid argument. What do the victims think about it? Well, guess what? Those victims of the 40,000 car accidents also lost their lives. The outcome is the same, but the manner in which they cease to live is different. I mean, that's a stupid argument.
There's no difference to the victim, but it's a different kind of crime, and it's a different proportion also. Do you know what percentage of white people are school shooters?
I know that the vast majority of mass shootings in schools in America this century were perpetrated by young white men. And I'm
what proportion?
I'm curious.
What proportion?
I'm curious whether your advice would be to people who have kids in these schools.
Wait, is my mic working?
Should they?
What proportion?
Should they avoid white people at school? Should people with the kids at school avoid young white men at school?
No.
Okay.
Do you know what per capita means? Do you know proportionality? There are more black people proportionally that engage in violent crime or are involved in gangs, especially in these major cities, than there are white people that are school shooters. compared to the entire white population, and everybody understands that.
So yeah, he's making a distinction. So, how do I explain this? He'll explain it a little bit later, but what he's saying is there's the total number of white people that commit crimes, and then there's a percentage of white people that commit those crimes. So yeah, the larger number, which the population of white people in this country, I think, is 65%.
Two-thirds of mass shootings at school perpetrated by white people.
But what proportion of white men commit school shootings? That's the question.
I've just told you. It's 60-65% of school shootings by white people.
You're telling me what proportion of school shootings are committed by white people. I'm saying what proportion of white people have committed school shootings. Are you playing dumb, or are you just not that smart?
What difference does that make to the children lying dead on the ground?
See, now you want to jump on the victims. The difference is you're asking, would you fear white people or black people? And that's the difference. The difference is in terms
what I'm saying
of
to you is by your logic, if we now have agreed that the vast majority of mass shootings in schools are committed by white people and predominantly young white men, then presumably your advice would be to avoid young white men because they perpetrate these massacres. But it won't be because they're white, right?
So are you playing dumb, or are you actually dumb?
Maybe
it's
I'm
about
dumb.
proportionality.
Maybe I'm dumb.
You are because you're, well, I don't think you are dumb. I think you're smart, actually, but you're deliberately avoiding per capita.
So this is what Nick is talking about.
Are you playing dumb, or are you just not that smart?
So this is what Nick is talking about. It says, when adjusted for population size per capita, no single racial group is systemically over or underrepresented. So Piers is trying to make it that, 65%, which that's not the percentage that we're going to see right here. No category is over or underrepresented, meaning that they're similar to whatever their population percentages. So let's go down. All right, let's scroll down. So race or ethnicity, white, makes up 53 to 55% of mass shootings. That's 10 to 12% lower than what Piers is saying. The share of population, approximately 58 to 62%. Here, the share of population is in this data is 58 to 62%. So what Nick is getting at is the percentage of participation in the shootings are 54%, we'll say, we'll take the average, but the population share is 60. So the share in for white people is less than their population. In the black community, the population is 12 to 13. Well, here it says 12 and a half. Nick was using the stat of 13% of the population, and they're doing 22%. That's almost double their population in percent, right? So do you see what he's saying? So yeah, if you look at the population at whole, yeah, the number is larger for white people, but and look at my good old Hispanics, right? We're lower than our population, so we're good. We're only 20%. That's pretty good though, right? And that's a little surprising that the Asians are a little bit higher than their population. So, but this is what it's saying. So what Piers was, I don't know where he got his data from. His data points are completely wrong. It's not 65%. He either doesn't know how to read his trend, or he got bad info. So that's what Nick is trying to point out.
And everybody knows that's the difference. What proportion of white men are school shooters? It's probably 0.0000001%. 1%. What proportion of black men have committed violent crimes? It's probably like 5%. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it's very high. And I would add to that, even as it concerns schools, why do you think parents pay a super high property tax to live in a school district where there's white people? Because they know that if they go to the black school, it's going to be the Bloods and the Crips. It's going to be gangs. It's going to be, you talk about school shootings. Nobody talks about all the school shootings that are committed by gangbangers in and around the school and all the other violence that's associated with that. I mean, these schools in the south side of Chicago, it's just not livable.
I have an answer for you, Nick. So the proportion of the population who carry out mass shootings is actually the same for black and white.
For white people, the proportion of
the proportion
again,
of the population.
Are you hearing it? No.
See, I think the trouble with your statistics is a lot of them don't bear much scrutiny. We have a bunch of fact checkers checking all this in real time because you do have a tendency to just come out with a lot of old baloney. And when you say,
okay,
well, it's true. And when you're confronted with reality, you don't like it.
What's the figure? What proportion of white people have committed school shootings? With white people as the denominator and white people that have committed school shootings as the numerator, what's that percentage?
For both.
So two things are going on here. For one, Nick is embarrassing Pierce because he's asking him for the number and he's asking him for per capita, and Pierce is just not supplying that. So Nick's at a little disadvantage. As Pierce said, he has fact checkers. And even if you have live fact checkers, that's real difficult to do on a even when you're doing it right on that instant. Right? It's difficult. So, but are they right? Is the Piers Morgan show right? Well, let's carry on.
Both black and whites, the proportion of the population who carry out mass shootings generally is about the same.
No. Tell me the number, and then
the only focus of your attention is the black shootings, the black crime. You don't want to live around black people. You want to avoid black people. You don't want interracial marriages or relationships that may produce black people. And yet, when I point out to you that there are many parts of crime in America where actually there's a majority of white people that perpetrate them, you don't care. You don't have any interest in that. It doesn't exercise your mind. Maybe because
no one's buying this. This
kids.
Argument lost. No one is buying this. Everybody understands per capita, and people can even see what you race ahead and say, well, we're comparing the proportion of white and black school shooters. I said, no, compare the proportion of school shooters that are white versus violent criminals that are black, because that was the basis of the monologue, is that you're very likely, if you encounter black people or a young black man in the city, that you're going to be the victim of a violent crime, of a robbery, a mugging, a car theft, a carjacking, or a murder. That's the difference, and it's about proportionality. And everybody sees past that.
Pearson made a claim that the number of school shootings is the same between blacks and whites. So here's something I found. This is on ammo.com if you want to check it out for yourself. So mass shootings by race. And I'll tell you this, it was difficult to even find this because it appears that Google and the internet don't want to state it this way, and maybe I just don't know where to look exactly. I looked at the FBI statistics from 6 months ago, and there's just so much information that it's kind of hard to decipher. But here's this report. But I want to direct your attention to this report. Highlights black and white males, and maybe this is where they got their information on the Piers Morgan show. Black and white males exclude. Here's a key thing. This is exactly what Nick just said, excluding gang violence. We're going to come back to that. Have the highest rates of mass shootings among demographic groups with 0.09 incidents per 100,000 people. Oh man, they are the same. Was Pierce right? Well, let's look at this website's own trend and see. It says black and Native American are the same. White is over here at 0.05. So no, these are Native Americans. These are white in their categorization Black and Native Americans are almost double that of the white community. And good old Latinos are down here at a third. That's what's up. We're just a docile people, man. We just want to live, you know what I'm saying? So, but I want to bring your attention to this. Methodology. Remember this up here? Excluding gang violence. Check this out. So, by definition, one of the definitions of mass shooting is victims totaling 4 or more constitutes a mass shooting. But what they don't include in that number, as we'll see right here, is in the methodology of this study, defining mass shootings. There is no standard definition for mass shooting. What I said was just one of them. In the United States, mass shootings, as defined in this article, are public shootings with 4 or more deaths, right? Excluding the shooter, and do not include gang or family violence, which is domestic disputes, right? Where that's a big part of where these things happen. So let's take a look at another one. So Piers pivots away from the gang violence, inner city violence of Chicago, and he says, well, how do you feel about mass shootings and school shootings? Well, this mass shooting fact sheet from Rockefeller Institute of Government says the total fatalities in, I think this might be 2023, was 1,700. For 1 year, 1,700. All right, keep that in mind. So here it says, so the total deaths from guns, total, everything, suicide, homicide, all those things, 46,728. Homicides. They account for 38% of gun deaths, including various forms of criminal violence, such as domestic disputes, robberies, and gang activity. There's the missing ingredient, right? So what is that? What does that look like? Okay, so let's take 46,728, and we're going to divide that, or actually we're going to multiply that times 0.38. So that's 17,756 deaths unaccounted for in the mass shooting chart. So when Piers is diverting to, do you care about mass shootings? He's talking about 1,700 deaths compared to 17,000 deaths. As we saw in that trend, the trend breaks down only mass shootings. So when ammo.com does their study and they come up with this number, they're not including that 17,000 number. They said it in their own methodology, right? So when they have this trend and it shows 53% of participants in the mass bang-bangs are 53%, what is this trend going to look like when you put the 17,000 on there? It's going to be a lot different, right? So that's why Piers is embarrassing himself, because he either doesn't know the data, his team doesn't know the data, or they know the data and they're purposely misleading you to think that, like, oh yeah, 50%, 65%, that number was wrong. Whites don't commit 50% of those. It's only 53%. And the population is more than what the offenses are of that demographic. So he's not saying, he's either not telling the truth or he doesn't know the data. And that Nick apparently does know, at least enough to recall, like, that doesn't even include violence in the city, robberies, gang violence, and domestic violence. When you put that number on that chart, it's going to change things, is it not? So that's where I'm going to leave it for today. This is a super long video. I'm probably going to chop it up, and I might just release the whole thing together. And I'll have a conclusion of what I feel about my overall thoughts. So thanks for joining me on this, and it's compelling. Yeah, I don't think Nick's going to ever run for office, and I don't think he can, because his views, although when broken down or defensible, the way he comes off is he comes off racist. He's a podcaster. Here's the thing. He's a 27-year-old kid that's saying stupid stuff. And I had 20 something kids that were stupid. Okay. Is that controversial to say that my kids were dumb? They said dumb things. I was a 20 something year old kid that said stupid things. I said stupid things when I was 30. You know, I probably say stupid things now. And I think that's one of the points Nick makes that's not said here is I think he might say it later in the interview, is that he'll say the things like there's a term out there, saying the quiet part out loud. That's usually referred to in the political sphere, but that's very much what Nick's point is. I'm going to say on my live stream, the way I talk in real life, what you get is the real article, is the real deal. And some of that's offensive. It is. And, but in your own personal conversations alone, in my personal conversation by myself, or not by myself, I'm talking to myself, but in my private conversation with other people, do I say stuff that's, off color? And I mean, heck, I watch comedy shows that are more offensive than what Nick is saying. So, I don't know. I don't know how to take it as a public personality. I just think that he hurts his own arguments when he uses the verbiage that he uses. So I'll leave it there. Love you guys. Like, share, and subscribe. Yeah. So until next time, love you. Bye.